all over places, and of course, colleagues from various units within Secretariat and Global Mechanism. Thank you very much for joining this very important workshop, Training of Trainers. As you are aware, let me give you a context. At orders in COP13, parties adopted a 4-year plan for preparation of national reports on the strategic objectives and implementation of strategic framework for UNCCD 2018-2020. COP13 also requested the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism to coordinate with UN agencies to provide targeted and timely support for capacity building of parties for UNCCD reporting cycle. In this context, we are going to organize regional workshops on UNCCD reporting process, which will be a very important step as well as milestone for the process as it sets the ground rules for this important exercise this year. The regional workshops are scheduled for March, April 2018 in coming 2 months at different regional locations, which will be shared with you, or you maybe the presentation will really come out details on that. As part of this exercise, the training of trainers, this workshop is being organized not only as a warm-up step, but also I will urge you to use this opportunity and take it more like full dress rehearsal for the regional workshops. I do believe that we will not only learn thoroughly all the components of UNCCD reporting exercise from the relevant colleagues present in this room, here in the podium, but also it will be a very great opportunity to improve the reporting process based on your feedback. In fact, this is very important for us at the management level to get your feedback on the reporting process, where you feel there are concerns, where you feel there are issues to be addressed. To the extent possible, we must address them now before regional workshops start. And all of you are very experienced professionals working different fields, including consultants, and your inputs, your understanding of ground realities and linking with the global reporting process will help us to fine-tune our presentations, our approach, our material, our process during the regional workshops, and then put it into practice in the coming months. Please note that UNIDO reporting exercise for 2017-18 has evolved to a great extent from the previous cycle, which some of you are involved, if not all, and it requires in-depth understanding of all progress indicators. I hope you understand this is the first time that countries will be provided with the default data, and they will be invited to either verify it or replace with data from authentic national resources. So we are looking at a very interactive process, a very strong teamwork between UNCCD, partners and parties. And that's where all of you will play a very, very important role in different levels. We need to understand for effective reporting to the UNCCD progress indicators, we are also enabling countries to achieve and report against SDG 15.3. Please remember, we are looking at this process at 2 levels. One is UNCCD own reporting, which is a very important exercise, a core activity of UNCCD. But also it will help us, parties, to report on SDGs, especially SDG 15. And if we do believe that SDG 15 is the accelerator for all other SDGs, so please, I feel that this will help them to really move forward on all 17 SDGs. In most countries, I understand there's a process in place on SDGs. So I'm sure our national focal points will link up with that SDG process within their own countries, and that becomes a very important global process itself. I'm very pleased here that we have a resource person for Conservation International, CI. He's here. Thank you so much for joining us. I do believe, and my colleagues have briefed me, that you will be sharing with us land degradation monitoring tool. This is very important for us, how to use this tool. Of course, we may be using different component of tools already in our exercise, And we have a very strong STI group here. We have a chief scientist here. We have so many colleagues working on that area. So I'm sure you will help us also linking to our global land outlook exercise and how we can really link up further in the reporting process itself, because it will have a lot of ramifications for us if we find this tool very useful and we are able to mainstream it in our reporting process as it is, or maybe revising it to the extent that it helps us to move forward with more focused action. I heard that it is specifically useful for countries for making policy decisions, and this is where I feel that becomes a very important input from all of us. Wherever I'm sure you go or I go or Monique goes, everywhere we meet policy makers, and one of the main components of all our capacity building exercises is how do we really empower policy makers to take well-informed decisions on land use planning, on the climate change process, addressing mitigation, and of course looking at adaptation. So all these things come somehow links up, but we call it connecting the dots at the ground zero, at the country level, at the village level, the community level, and this is where this linkage becomes very important. I hope it will be a very useful contribution for the countries during the regional workshops. I look forward to a very active participation and useful discussions in coming 2 days. I understand there are around 35 participants, and of course we have colleagues from STI, GM, ERPA, EDM, data consultants, and resource persons from especially our guest Conservation International. Let me again, on behalf of our Executive Secretary Monique Barbu, welcome you all to a very important milestone here, workshop training of trainers. Please make use of this opportunity, give us your feedback, take very interactive participation, and help us to really fine tune our reporting exercise so that we can meet our objectives. We help countries to move forward on SDG 15 and of course meet the obligations under UNCCD convention. Thank you once again and wish you a very fruitful deliberations in next 2 days. Thank you.
Now I go into the introduction of the 2017 and 2018 UNCCD reporting. Some of it may be repetitive because many of you have been around. But we also have to bear in mind that these presentations will be given to parties where we have, on a continuous basis, new appointments for focal points, and they may not be 100% aware of how the UNCCD reporting has been evolving. I wanted also to ask my colleague Sasha, to say a couple of words on the linkages to the SDGs. How progress indicator reporting of the UNCCD is linked to that process. I will go into the capacity building efforts that we are undertaking and go through the reporting timelines as we have devised them. Finally, I would like to just capture what we are expecting from ourselves and from parties, with the capacity building that we are providing, and with that I will finish the presentation. So first of all, we go into the history of UNCCD reporting. Because prior to the first strategy that parties adopted, there wasn't really anything that really prescribed parties to report on specific standards. We had simple guidelines that basically helped parties to provide information, but the information that we obtained was not standardized by all means. And it was very, very difficult for us, to basically draw conclusions and recommendations from the information obtained. This led to the consideration by parties that a more focused approach to the implementation of the convention is needed. And therefore, they came up with this idea of having a strategy that they devised and which was adopted in 2008. In 2008. So the first strategy had a lifespan of 2008 to 2018, so 10 years. And it had comprised strategic objectives and operational objectives. The operational objectives had targets attached to them, whereas the progress indicators were standalone. They didn't have any targets. And I think due to that problem of not having targets, the review was basically focused on the operational objectives and the performance indicators. Performance indicators were based on institutional process, for example, whether a country has had a NAB or whether they had integrated or incorporated the important contribution from civil society organizations. And in due course, parties felt that this was really not enough in order to measure how the implementation of the UNCCD was achieved. In addition to that, the progress indicators that were adopted needed a lot of work and further work on by the CST, which was sort of conducted while the 2008 to 2018 strategy was implemented. So by the end of that strategy, I think parties had the opinion that something needed to change. We needed to focus on more of the implementation and the monitoring of the progress indicators, while giving less emphasis to the performance indicators and the institutional processes relevant to the UNCCD. With that, they basically decided to, at COP12, to establish an intergovernmental working group, which looked into a new strategic framework which would build on the existing one. And by COP13, we had parties adopting the new strategic framework, which is now from 2018 to 2030. And the emphasis of that framework is indeed on the progress indicators and on stories that will help country parties to understand what parties are doing at national level on implementation efforts. So in terms of the progress indicators, as I said before, there was a long process that was undertaken by the CST and the colleagues of the UNCCD Secretariat here in Bonn to fine-tune those indicators and basically come up with a consolidated list that had specific requirements for reporting. While this was done, there was also an idea that was brought about by parties that capacity building, especially on progress reporting, progress indicator reporting, is needed. And the idea at COP12 was that to request the Secretariat to come up with default data that will be provided to parties as part of the reporting process. So I mean the change that we had from the last strategy to the current one is that the progress indicator reporting or the progress indicators remained the same, more or less. But the big change was that due to the lack of capacity at country level, the Secretariat is now requested to provide default data to parties that they can use or they may not use, but at least that they have a starting point from which they can start monitoring the implementation of the convention. And now I would like to ask Sasha, to say something about how these progress indicators are linked to the UNCCD reporting.
Tomorrow, I will have a 45-minute presentation where I'm going to go into a lot of detail about the SDGs, and I know there's a lot of questions, how it relates to the UNCCD reporting, and what the future holds in terms of the convergence of these two reporting processes. And there'll be plenty of time for questions as well. I would like to say a few words here, and perhaps some of you are unaware of the good news, and that being that our indicator, 15.3.1, has been upgraded to a Tier 2 status in the IAEG process. This is the interagency expert group that's working on the SDG indicators. So we've been upgraded from a tier 3 to a tier 2. And this has a number of ramifications for the way that we act as the custodian agency for this indicator. And in terms of our collection of national data, and then our aggregation at the regional and global level for a number of reports that come out of New York. So that is something I'd like to, that you all know as we go forward and look at the 3 progress indicators today. And then tomorrow we'll take a look at the tool and then go into the SDGs. Another issue is this idea of cycles, reporting cycles. As the custodian agency, we've been able to basically harmonize the UNCCD and the SDG reporting cycles on a 4-year basis, so that in 2018 we will be ready for the 2019 cycle of SDG reporting, and then every 4 years afterwards from our cycle, a 1-year lag to the next, and I'll explain more about how that works. And then finally, the idea of data flows and the role of the NSOs is going to be crucial. So we'll have a bit of a discussion on that in terms of how we can increase or enhance those linkages to improve both our process as well as the SDG reporting.
Now we move on to the capacity building, which has always been an integral part of the support provided by the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism to parties in the reporting. Capacity building is only being made possible by the funding that we receive from the GEF and from, through UNEP. So I would like to use that opportunity to really thank the GEF Secretariat and UNEP for enabling us, to provide support to country parties on reporting. The bottlenecks of UNCCD reporting, I think, has become clear. It's the 2017-18 reporting has become a lot more complex, more technical. It requires expertise at national level that may or may not be there. And for that, we need to ensure that reporting is made as easy as possible. We are lucky that the UNCCD reporting, with the requirements that we have to date, i.e. the reporting on the progress indicators and most importantly the biophysical indicators that Sasha has talked about, had a precedent or a preceding event, and that is the target setting program that was established and implemented by the Global Mechanism. Through the target setting program, country parties have been exposed to the indicator work that needs to be done at national level. And a lot of them have gone through that experience of looking at the data, coming up with targets that they wanted to set at national level on a voluntary basis. And so, I mean, it's what we are now asking country parties to do for UNCCD reporting is basically nothing more complicated than what they have gone through already. So it is our great hope that with the target setting program and the work already done by the colleagues of the Global Mechanism, that we can move ahead and that the country parties can provide information readily, easily or more easily than they would be in the position to do so without having had the opportunity to look at the data. In addition to our in addition to the target setting program, we also have those regional workshops that Pradeep has mentioned. And we also have an online help desk, which basically helps country parties who get stuck on certain issues, to reach out to the Secretariat and the Global Mechanism in order to ask questions and get responses in a relatively short time. So we are now basically using this TOT for the preparation of our regional workshops. of which we have 6. We basically do this normally for each region. So we have one in Africa, we have actually 2 in Asia, one for the Pacific countries, and we have an additional one for Arab countries this time. So we have covered all the regional implementation annexes, Africa, Asia, Latin America, and CE in North Med. And we hope that with those regional workshops that we are preparing and the help desk, that we will be able to achieve that country parties will be enabled to submit their reports. The expectation from our management is very high. Monique made this very clear that she wants to have 100% submission rate. I mean, those people that have worked in reporting, Pedro, we know that this is, 100% is not possible. We all know that. But last time, in the last reporting, where we had similar means to provide support to parties, we did achieve 94% of submission rate of affected country parties. So I mean, we are stretched, and the mark is set very high for us, and I do hope that with the additional challenges of the biophysical indicators and all the other indicators, we will be at least reaching the submission rate that we had last time. The regional workshops will be for 2 participants per country. So our hope is that, along with the focal point, who in many cases is a political focal point, we also have the possibility to bring an additional participants that is more technically, technical and more scientifically versed than the focal point. So the idea of the regional workshops is to transform or transfer that knowledge on UNCC reporting to the relevant persons in the country, and the workshops will also deal with other regional issues that are relevant to the region. As part of a more broader UNCCD regional workshop. Now we go to the reporting timeline, and I do hope that you can see what is on the screen. This is our tentative timeline. The only fixed date that we have is that CRIC 17 is to be held in January 2019. And that is for us a very important date, because everything else is dependent on this convening of CRIC 17, which basically means that the deadline, the tentative deadline for UNCCD national reports needs to be, somewhere in July or August. And I think together with the CRIC Bureau, we will look at we will monitor the reporting process and see whether we have the tentative the deadline set in July or in August, depending on where the countries are. Capacity building, as I said before, will happen in March, April. So after this TOT, we will start working on and finalizing the work relating to the regional workshops, inviting country parties, maybe updating our PowerPoint presentations in the light of what we are discussing today and tomorrow. And from basically December onwards or January, we had a help desk online that is there for country parties to throw at us any question that they may have, reaching from problems relating to the login to specific problems that they may have in filling in the tables for SO11, for example. So, I mean, this is basically the timeline that we have for the reporting, and I do believe that we are in almost there to have all the reporting tools available. Manual and reporting templates will still be published in the coming week, and with that, I think we can move to the expected outcomes of the TOT. So the idea really is that we have in this room a group of people that have worked very intensively on the reporting, and they need to transfer that information to those people that are also part of the delivery teams and going to regional workshops. So the key messages should be clear to everyone. The delivery teams should be informed and should be enabled to take those PowerPoint presentations and go to those regional meetings, respond to questions that come from parties during those workshops. And as I said before, the video recordings will be used for the e-learning courses. So, this is an event where we would really like a lot of questions from your side. We would like to hear what you have to say in terms of, the PowerPoints that were prepared, and maybe questions that you may have on the substance itself. So, and with that, I close my presentation. Thank